While here. Summer threw me off a little bit on the morning lives. So anyway, it's time to wake up and smell the coffee, and I smelt mine on the way home today. And I went by Wake Up Coffee and got that nice traditional double. What is it? Half the amount of chocolate mocha, and then like basically made in half and half. So it's a breve. So it's like just super thick and wonderful. And then it's the perfect combo to add an extra shot to, because then you could really wake up. You know what I'm saying? And I think a lot of us need a lot of those extra shots right now. So there we have it. So I see Zach is on. That's not right. Hey, Zach. All right. So for the Hammerites, we'll be on at 7. So I'm coming on late to do this for anybody, so to speak. But so, how many of you guys have been in? This is kind of the way I described the last couple days. The swirl is thick, right? You can feel the enemy just kind of like chomping at all kind of things out here. Like you can just feel like it's all over the place. Like, kind of like the demoniac when Jesus casts out the demon and he throws him to the floor and he's thrashing, before he comes out. I think that's part of the thrashing that we're feeling right now, because there's something that Jesus is doing in raising up a righteous standard in the land and infusing the planet with his glory right now. And the way that things are about to blow up, we're at that precipice point. And for those of us that have gone through many thresholds, we're at a threshold, but we've actually crossed it, okay? And when in previous seasons, there's so much about this season at this juncture in the threshold that can feel like a previous season where things blew up. And so I've said a lot that this is not that, okay? If you're being triggered, it doesn't mean that the outcome is equivalent to the thing that you experienced as an outcome when you were triggered before. We're being triggered because it's every residue of any place in my soul that can be triggered by shame or by whatever is being triggered right now. Okay. So it's like, think about the demoniac. He has to leave. The demon's got to leave, but he's thrashing that boy on the ground on his way out. And we're in a season of becoming exporters. I love that term that Zach Preston came up with that I can freely use. I think if I use it 3 times, it becomes my own term now, right? Right. That and curated moments. So at any rate, so we're becoming exporters. Here's the part that is really, really challenging for many of us. I know for me it has been, is when you become the exporter, right? There's something about the season that that in order to really step into the thing that God is doing, right? That he's actually breathing on. You're creating the language for that moment as that moment is played out. So for prophetic people, forerunners, etc., it's a crazy place to be because we feel like we're floundering, right? We feel like we're just out there kind of whatever. And there's parts of it that just feel like, I remember when I gave that word about, the Lord just spoke those words about, recommissioning and resignation, and repurposing and resignation, etc. I'll have to explain what that means. But he basically said that I heard him one morning when I got up. It was like, yeah, you're turning in your resignation papers, and I thought, great, because I'll just go right down to the school, and just do that right this second. But what he meant was, not that that doesn't happen, but what he meant by that is that essentially my resignation is I've resigned from my plan. I've resigned from the era of the church. I'm done. We quit. We're done. Era of the church is resignation time. Era of the kingdom is commissioning time. And so in the resignation, it feels like you're coming to the end of something. And here's the catchy part, the part that gets tricky, because as you come to the end of something in an era, some of those triggers are being pushed. So it feels like something familiar from this time back here, right? Like you feel the outcome connected to something in the past, and that's why we have our little PTSD response, and we have to remind ourselves that this is not that, right? Because as you come to the end, and I saw this too, it's like, for many forerunners, prophetic people, you're coming to you see the finish line as you get ready to cross into and move over this threshold into this kingdom era where you actually do the thing you're created for, right? What a novel concept. But as you get there, you look at the people who are crossing the finish line, right? Because we thought like we feels like you're coming to the end of a race, and if you feel that way, that's the way it's been. And they're bloodied, they're bruised. I mean, they just totally mangled, right? I mean, completely mangled as they cross the line. But the good news is you're not at the end of something, you're at the beginning. And so the long traverse and journey that we've been through, because this is the part for us that's been very challenging. Many people who are prophetic, forerunners, etc., even just the remnant that Jesus is raising up, right? We've been through so much. And because we've been through so much and we've had things blow up, burn up, and you name it happen, right? All of those things have happened, right? We've blown up at every threshold. We watch things go to, the stuff really hit the fan at different points. We've had the perfect storm of the enemy that comes out and just tries to take us out. We've had that season, right? We're not going to repeat that season again. Not in that way. Not that there aren't any battles. I remember, when my wife and I were coming out of a 10-year period in our life where real literally we had the perfect storm and we lost, so much. And there's a huge return on that, by the way. And, coming into, we moved to Brunswick during that time, it was part of our start over, right? Here was the land of promise and dreams. And the Lord spoke to me at that time. He said, as in the days of Noah, this the waters of destruction will not come to take you out again. Meaning that perfect storm was the perfect storm, but that storm isn't coming. It didn't mean there were no more battles, but it meant that that storm was done. Like, and many of us have found ourselves in that spot. If you haven't found yourself in that spot, just raise your hand. Right, I can see you now. So having said that, the part that was crazy challenging after that, because for me, it was like I had walled up my heart for so many years, self-protection galore. Like I had a master's degree in self-protective walls, right? Because I didn't want to be hurt. I didn't want to be disappointed. I felt like I've been contending from disappointment for years, and I was angry with God and frustrated. At that time I was probably still living in that little Egypt place and that orphan place, but I was so frustrated and offended with him because I couldn't believe that he could allow some of the things to come. Because talk about messy life as a Christian. I mean, nobody even thinks you are one during that season because they look at you and they're like, I don't know any Christians that do that. You know what I mean? Like, when your life's blowing up, people flee, they run during the most crazy times in your life, right? Where things look way beyond, because the religious part of us can handle cute things like, oh, here's divorce recovery, or, oh, here, you're addicted to cigarette smoking or drinking. We got that. But if you're addicted to anything else, that's a little too messy for the church. We don't, got a little place out behind the building you guys can meet, your 12-step program and whatnot. And so essentially, the church hasn't handled mess real well. And consequently, they don't handle revival all the times well, because if you want the power of the ox, you got to deal with the mess that comes in the stall, right? So messy Christians, vagabonds, mavericks. I remember years ago, my first pastor that I was his assistant pastor in Vineyard Church in Miami, and he said this thing to me, and I thought, "Oh, that's so encouraging." But he said, "I see you as a wild stallion with flaring nostrils, right? Power, right?" And I thought, "Yeah, I'm a wild stallion." And then he said, the Lord said, well, who will put the bit in your mouth? I thought, I don't, you had to scratch your head and think, I don't know if I like the last part of that part. Like, because when you're built as a maverick from day one, when you're built that way, when you're from birth, you've always been the maverick. Like, you're the kid that gets kicked out of every school, right? You're the kid that is like the wild, they don't know what to do with you because you're ADD off the chart and you're this, and this, and you cut against the grain and you do rejection your entire life because nobody knows what to do with you and they think you're weird as all get out or that you at least have major problems. All true. That's kind of that's kind of what our norm has been, right? And so you're cutting against the grain of what's norm, what people never were aptly able to identify, which would be nice because it's good to have mothers and fathers in the faith. I found out later, years later in the vineyard, when I would go to my vineyard pastor and tell him everything I've ever done, he would just look at me like, and like, "That sounds pretty normal to me," he would say. And I'm like, "Wait a minute, I thought I was the only one on the planet that dealt with this kind of stuff, right? Like, I thought I was it?" It was his affirmation that just did so much in my psyche that I wasn't just the weirdest thing on the planet. I wasn't the outcast of the generation, you know what I mean? I wasn't being tossed out, that I was actually there was something that was intact in me. But when that's your norm, here's what happens when the enemy comes and tries to take out that kind of person, right? Because most of us have a lot of that stuff of loss, rejection, trauma, etc. Um, it created in me a huge offense with God. I was like, I can't believe you let this happen, right? But we're talking about a fatherless generation too, right? Factor that in, who thinks that God's abandoning them every time stuff gets really tough. So it was like an easy place for me to go because that's the father that I carried in my heart during all those seasons. And so I was offended. But when he reconnected me, I got connected in worship. I've told this story plenty of times, but I went into a church, song on the screen, I bust. Jeremiah 17:9 makes a lot of sense in that moment, that my heart was deceitful, that somehow my heart was telling me that I had been abandoned or let go, and that he wasn't with me or that I was separate from him during that time. And that statement in my heart was a straight up lie, right? So I realized in that moment, as he reconnects my heart, that much of it was like reconnecting a hard drive. It was like the last 10 years, I didn't miss a beat with you. Like suddenly, all the place of where I was with you at the time, the glorious place I was with you before the great destruction period, I'm suddenly there with you again, and that place of my first love. And I'm like, okay, this is crazy. That's the economy of heaven, by the way. When he restores, it comes with such magnitude. It's on steroids that it's like the captives coming back from Zion, awe and wonder because they can't believe that something could be so good. They can't believe it so much that they even forget what all of that last season was about. That's what we're walking into. Seasons of the greatest fulfillment that we've ever experienced for such a time as this. And that's why the journey has been so horrific in so many places. That's why we've been like the demoniac thrown on the ground and thrashing, because essentially the enemy has come after you because he knows what kind of seed that you are in the earth and he knows what you're going to sprout into. He knows he doesn't know everything you're created for, but he knows that there's something of the anointing of heaven. There's this heaven stamp on you that has to do with your calling and your mandate and whatever. He just knows how big you are on God's map. And all he knows is that he's got to try to destroy that. Okay. And he does everything he can to do it. He comes in at the places of our greatest weakness, and that's where he just kind of goes to town. And so, in this era, the thing we leave behind the locked door, number one over here, is we leave behind the grief, we leave behind the loss. We're coming into an era where we're going to the wine and the wineskin both get preserved, and that stuff is going to be locked away. We're not going to visit it again. It has nothing to do with who you are today. The only degree that it has anything to do with you and me today is the degree to which you stay tethered to it. But when you untether, you're done. And that's the part I want to say. There is great, great grace right now to be untethered from the past, to leave the camp of religion, to come over into the camp of the kingdom as a manifest son and daughter who functions from your union, who knows that the totality of the kingdom, even in the Dream Giver series we've been doing. The most profound line was when, nobody, so no, Mr. Ordinary says, hey, the thing that I've always needed or wanted or whatever was already inside of me. This is the age of it's already inside of you and rediscovering what's already in you because you have it all. That's a big transition. The part that was a challenge coming out of the great destruction, and I remember calling my friend in California, wailing my guts out. And it was because I was grieving, because suddenly I had to grieve the loss of so many things, including what it meant to dream, because I didn't know how to do that one. It was the most confusing topic on the planet for me. What's the desire of your heart? What's your dream? Because for many of us, that dream got leveled. The dream is what went up in smoke as we contended from disappointment for years. So reconnecting now to the dream, here's the big shift in this season. For many, it's been rewritten. For many, it might be part of something you thought back here. It might have been, it might not have, it might be 20% that and 80% new. It could be any configuration, because he's rewriting the canvas for this season of your heart, and there's new things that are written on it. And part of what makes this era so different and this landscape so different and the way that we function is that we are in a spot where we are willing to do stuff that we've never done before. Because in the old religious system, what do we do to prepare? We go to seminary, we get a few degrees, we start a church, and none of those things in themselves are bad, right? But think about it. In the old regime, your success was monitored, is built on what you did. It was the same success model as any other corporation, right? You climbed your way, you did what you do, and you were successful. You built a ministry, skyscraper to the, heaven, supposedly. And then we watched that house of straws come down like overnight. In this era, it isn't about what you know, who you know, what your skill set is, what you think you can do, what you don't think you can do. The qualification for this era is you're still standing. There it is. Your qualification is that you're still standing and that you know a couple of things because of what the season has done in your radical perseverance. God is good all the time, always, no matter what, even if I have to relegate some things to mystery that I don't understand. Number two, I'm not an orphan. I have a limitless capacities, and heaven is not limited. Number three, one, two, three. Okay, yeah, yes, this. Yeah, number three. I know that God's good. I'm not an orphan, and I'm resigned to my victimization. I don't do victimization in this season, and I know that the mandate is bigger than me, and I know that I'm the mantle that goes with it is bigger than me, and I know that he's so on it that I can't really screw it up, which is very disconcerting for those of us who have been performance driven in the church era and we measure everything by how how the dream measured and how big it got and what we were able to establish or not establish. To suddenly be in a place like this is to essentially find ourselves in a place where our whole purpose is being redefined. Ironically, not redefined, but just think of it this way: that landscape was to bring you into this landscape. That landscape exhausted everything you thought you knew, everything you thought you were about, so that when you come into this landscape, you have a clean slate and you're actually in a place where you could do unscripted life and live, move, and have our being in Him. How is that challenging for pioneers? That landscape had a script. And if you follow this script to a T, you got the promotion. This landscape, the little guy is the first shall be last, the last shall be first. It's the ragamuffin band of people who have been standing there, been through the storm, who look like they're bloodied and messy and a whole that's us. This crazy remnant that's been brutalized in this last season. Now, suddenly in this season, your qualification and your purpose are simply because of who you know. You're not invested, we're not married to an outcome. Religious system builds outcomes. Kingdom system builds in relationship, and that which is done in secret becomes the thing that gives me great power, so that the words that I speak and declare in this era don't fall to the ground because they're wrought in a third heaven place. And when we hear there and we speak here, it's a radically different paradigm. This is the one where you hear it and you do it, and you hear it and you do it, and you apprehend it revelation wise and you do it this way. All right, so what's the cognitive dissonance here? I know it's a revelatory thing. I know that it's living in third heaven place. I know that it's the cultivated intimacy that puts the word in my mouth that comes out. I'm okay with that. But still, my question becomes, then what am I about? I know something about the way I function. It's the identity part that we have to be resigned to. The 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 church realm identity is buried. This new identity is exactly that. It's new. It's a new place of identification and it for a new landscape. This is the era where all things are new. It's very disconcerting. It's very discombobulating. But it's the sweetest spot to be in the kingdom because it means now that we will build what heaven is already building. And what we declare as being permitted in the earth will be permitted already in heaven. And what we bind on earth will already be bound. How does that happen? Because when you live from union, the agreement with heaven is already implied in what you're doing because it comes from the place that you're living. That was a lot. Does it make sense? So, in redefining our purpose and us feeling radically insecure, I am like there. I have a journal entry. I'm gonna read the first part of it. Ready? Because I've been learning multiple platforms. I felt like I needed to learn all the multimedia platforms. I needed to learn them and know them. I need to learn about documentary filmmaking. I need to learn about certain things. So it's like I'm in this totally new world. I still function the same, but the whole world that I'm doing it in, and I'm not doing it with anything that I know about or that I feel confident in or secure in. In this area, we walk out in our security with a person, knowing that that person is with me, and that as I become the exporter, I do and create out of what's already in me, and I trust what's in me as I go. That's called adulting in the kingdom. So here we are. I said, ever since I said this to the Lord, I've been doing this multiple platform thing. I've been overwhelmed. There's so much to learn, and everything costs money, so many platforms, so many tools, and every time I sit down, I just want to start crying and I feel totally sick, right? Oh, stuck. Sick too works. I don't know how to prioritize anything, and I feel so much time pressure because I know the beginning is coming around the corner. Like, things have to get decided this summer about where this is going. And then in the middle of all that, he says, open your Bible. I'm like, okay, fine. Right. So I did. All right. This is one of those moments that everybody talks about, right? Because I knew when I heard him say, open the Bible, that literally whatever I opened up to was going to be his response. I know everybody's had that experience at some point, or you just flip it open and it falls to something. You're like, oh, I knew that was going to happen. And if sure enough, as I opened it, here's what I read. The top, it's actually into verse 8, not even the beginning of it, in Isaiah 66. Shall a land be born in one day? Shall a nation be brought forth in a moment, in one moment? For as soon as Zion was in labor, she brought forth her children. Verse 9. Shall I bring to the point of birth and not cause to bring forth, says the Lord? Shall I who cause to bring forth shut the womb? We're all in a huge womb right now, and we're coming out of that womb and we're birthing. And the challenge is we're exporting from the womb in ways that we haven't before. And that's why it's so insecure and why it feels so whatever. But there's also something in it that feels really exciting. This is how Jesus restores the dream. This is how Jesus turns you into a dreamer again. When the clean slate that you're bringing and your empty hands, when you just bring your loaf and your two fish, this is all I've got. He says, bring me the loaf, bring me the fish, and we're going to multiply. And you're going to do things you never thought you could do that you don't know anything about. But that's what it's going to take to see my glory. It's like, do the thing you know, build it, but precept by precept, bit by bit, the thing that's already in you. This is the key to this moment in becoming an exporter. It doesn't matter how insecure we feel, it's irrelevant. Take what you know is in you and build it. And as you go, I will define it. I will give you the language to export it. I will fill out the picture. You will see favor on steroids, but it's going to start with the little thing that's inside of you, that it's already there. This is called adulting in the kingdom. I want you now to be the manufacturer, and you're going to function from your union with me instead of functioning from any other paradigm that you've ever had. It's a new way to function, to live, move, and have our being in Him. And it's a new landscape to do it in that requires a different way of functioning that He has prepared you and me for. Not because we know it, not because we're not messy, but because we've come to love and be tethered to a person who is in me already and one with me. Therefore, I can trust what is inside of me as it comes forth, and I can take a step at a time. The struggles, the things you dealt with in the old landscape, a lot of those things, even your internal struggles, your addictions, all that stuff, it's going to fall off, burn off, everything. Don't focus on smoke and mirrors that the enemy is trying to shuffle up as we cross this threshold. It's smoke and mirrors. When you feel like the kitchen sink and everything and the fan is flying, and we all know what goes in the fan, right? Okay. I'm going to have to pull a Dave Hogan on you, just tell you, but I won't. When it's hitting you, just know that that's the thrashing of the end. That's the thrashing. The devil's leaving this territory of your heart and your dream. He's leaving your scenario, and you're at a point of no return where once you cross this threshold, which you have, you are in a place where most of this behind you will be dismantled. It doesn't mean that there's not a war in front of you. It just means that his attempt to keep you out of the thing you're made for was and is present continuous an epic fail, because he has appointed many things to happen in this time, and what he has predetermined and appointed for this time, it will happen, period. It's the greatest time of both the sovereignty of God and the responsibility of man being married in an action that is birthed out of your union with Him. Those two come together and you built it together. So, blessings. Leave a comment. Make sure you like and share and all those kind of things. And I love the dialogue that we have with you guys. And so, we will be on in a little bit with the Hammerites, and then I know Zach, the Wake Up with Doc Scott Zach thing will be up again. So we'll be up and at him again. We're going to keep moving and doing what we know to do. And our prayer is that you do too. In Jesus' name.